Hi, Phyllis here, southernfrugal.com. Well, it's late Sunday afternoon, it's getting dark, and it's been raining kind of off and on all day, and we're getting ready to make some, we'll call them apple fritters, or I'm going to call them my grandmother's or my grandma's apple fritters. Because, now I'll give you a little story behind all this. My grandparents, that's my mother's mother and father, had a home that they inherited from my great-grandmother, and she had planted an apple orchard just out a little ways from their house, and it was, they looked like golden delicious apples, only they weren't quite golden delicious apples. They were some other kind, because now you just can't find an apple that tastes as good as those tasted. And so my grandmother would can those every year, and we would have to go out and pick up the apples from under the tree or either shake the limb and then get those that fell naturally. They didn't want us picking them off the tree. And they would always be full of worms and bug holes, and out all under the tree there'd be so many apples that were rotten, and there'd be yellow jackets flying around and all that. So we hated picking up those apples. But a lot of neighbors and other relatives would come and get those apples every year. And so we would be sitting around peeling apples forever so Grandma could can a whole bunch of them. And so she would can them most of the time in the little, I guess that would be a pint. No, is that a pint? Anyway, it would hold 16 ounces. I don't know my measurements, can y'all tell? Anyway, some of them she would can in quarts. And so on a rainy afternoon in the summertime, Grandma would say, well, let's go fix some apple fritters. Now, she called them apple fritters. They were more like apple turnovers, sort of a halfway between a fritter and a turnover. I don't know. My sister says she called them fritters, and I think she did too. So anyway, we're going to try to make those today. Now, she would make those with sometimes with leftover biscuit dough when she'd made biscuits, and then she would just go ahead and make some apple fritters too. So sometimes she would make them by just making up the biscuit type dough in the afternoon, and that way she could fix about 6 at one time. She'd have like 3 skillets going at the same time. And so what we would do is help her we didn't really help her that much, y'all, but we thought we were helping her because she'd let us press the edges together and all that. And anyway, sometimes when she was frying them, they might break apart and, have a big crack in them or something, and but they would still be delicious. Usually always on a rainy afternoon in the summertime is when she made those. So anyway, we're going to do our best to copy those. So again, it wasn't a pie crust dough, it was a biscuit dough, and they were made with self-rising flour. So I've already cooked some apples. I'll show those to you. Now I used Granny Smith apples, and I cooked them in just a little bit of water. They really were kind of steamed, and then I put them in a little strainer to get, a big part of the water out. Now, when I was cooking them, I didn't put any cinnamon in them, no sugar, nothing. And that's exactly the way Grandma canned her apples. She didn't add another thing, just the apples and a little water, and that would be what she would use to make the apple fritters. All right, so we're going to make the dough now, y'all. Y'all bear with me, okay? All right, so we've got about 2½ cups of sifted self-rising flour, and to that, I'm going to add, my guess is that's about maybe 3 tablespoons of shortening, and I'm using Crisco. And so I'm going to just act like I'm making biscuits. I'm going to also use whole buttermilk. So we're just going to kind of get that the Crisco all kind of mashed up in there. And you don't want to use much, 3 tablespoons at the most. All right, so we got it kind of all squished up into the flour. And now we're going to add the buttermilk. We're going to make sort of somewhat of a stiff batter, not really a soft batter, like you would make biscuits. So, and then I don't know what the measurement would be. It's just more like a feel for it. And that looks like about enough right there. So I'm making a stiff little dough here. Well, I need to add just a little more. Now I'm only going to make 4. Oops. So I might have too much dough to make 4, but that's what we're going to make. Now they were big, okay? I mean, it was almost like a meal when you had one of her apple fritters. But they were, very, very good. And especially because we would eat them while they were still warm. Sometimes they were hot. Okay, so I've gotten all of this flour and Crisco mixture kind of taken up into the dough. And so I keep turning it around like that to get up all of that flour. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of turn it around a little bit and get it to come together. Alright, so that's a little bit thicker than a biscuit dough. So what I'm going to do now is just kind of eyeball it and divide it into 4 different pieces. Can y'all see that? I'll just break them apart like that, and then roll each one into kind of a little ball. All right, so now we're ready. So let me get my rolling pin out. All right, I'm going to set this over to one side and get some of this off my hand. Don't want to have to clean it too much because it's just going to get messy again. Okay, so now we're going to dust our work surface with a whole bunch of flour. And this is the part where me and my sister would help to make these. Okay. So now we're going to mash that out like we were making a pie crust. Get plenty of flour on it. You can actually just do this with your hands, or you could roll them out. So we're going to do all 4 at one time. Now it's a little bit softer than a regular pie crust would be, simply because we added the buttermilk to them. All right, put some flour on that. Mash them all out. Yeah, I guess these would be called old-fashioned apple turnovers, maybe. Okay. So now we're going to roll them out just a little bit more. Make them kind of oblong. Move this one down a little bit. Move that one down a little bit. Okay, so they're kind of oblong now. All right. Now we're going to put our apples on probably right in the middle. So they're pretty well drained now. Put them on like that. We'll get these arranged better once I get all of it on there. And I cooked, I think this was five, maybe 6 apples. It might be a little bit too much. try to use all the apples. Yeah, I can tell you that when my grandmother made these, they were really almost considered a meal. They were so big. All right. Set that aside. Now, the next thing is to get them positioned on there. And remember, we didn't add any, let me turn y'all around a little bit so you can see all 4 of them. There we go. All right, so we didn't add any sugar at all cooking the apples because Grandma always canned her apples and didn't add one thing but water. So we're going to put a little cinnamon on the top of each one. Now my grandmother had a big country table in her kitchen and we would make them on the table. All right, now we're going to sprinkle a little sugar over the apples where we put the cinnamon. Maybe a couple of teaspoons in each one, maybe even as much as a tablespoon, because these apples are definitely not sweet. And I hope I don't have too many apples. Hopefully I don't. All right, and the next thing she did was add little small pats of butter. She would pinch off the butter and just kind of dab it all around, and the butter is going to come into play again when we start frying these. I hope I haven't got too many apples on this. Maybe I can stretch that flour over them. Hopefully I can. So because this is self-rising flour, when I start frying them, they're going to puff up kind of like biscuits do. You know, in the oven or even fried biscuits. And that would be the closest thing to compare it to. It's like fried biscuits with apples in the middle of them. Okay. Now what we're going to do is fold them over. And so what I want to do is get that apple down a little bit because we don't want the apple coming out. Even though sometimes Grandma's apples would come out of hers, but they were still so good. Okay, let me wash my hands real quick and we will continue this. So hold on. Okay, I got my hands all cleaned up, and so now we're going to try to fold this dough over these apples, and this should be a little tricky. Because this dough is not like a pie crust. So we're just going to pinch them together. That. And then the job that me and my sister had was to take the fork and mash that together. And sometimes we didn't do all that good a job. Mash those 2 ends together. Now let's see if I can mash that out just a little bit. Make it a little flatter. See, holes come in it real easy because it's not really a pie crust dough. All right, we got this one ready. All right, I'm going to get the other 3 ready. Well, why don't we do one more on camera? See if I can turn this around a little bit. Make sure you got plenty of flour on your surface. All right, so we're going to stretch it over. We'll stretch this a little bit too. Oops, see, it tore. Stretch it over like that. Be real careful when you're mashing it together because it will split the dough. Alright, now we're going to take the fork and mash those little ends together. Use my left hand over here. Okay, I'll mash it out just a little bit, making sure none of my apple comes spewing out, making sure that there's plenty of flour under that. All right, so there's the second one. See how big they are compared to my hand? They're really big. I mean, they would really kind of make a meal. And she didn't really put any little opening for the steam to come out until she had flipped them over in the pan. So I'm going to do these other two, and we'll be back and I'll get the skillets ready and we'll show you how they're fried. All right, I'm going to move all of this onto a big cutting board, or a pan would work too, so I can get my skillets ready. So I'm going to use 2 skillets. There we are. I'll show you what they look like. Oops, and one of them's already weeping out a little bit of apple juice, but that's okay. All right, so we're going to get our skillets on here. I'm going to use a little bit of Crisco to start them out, and then we'll be using butter. All right, we'll be back when the skillets get ready. All right, our skillets are hot and we're ready to put the apple fritters right in. And I'm going to use the smaller skillet for the smaller of them. And again, the heat is on medium. And any flour that's on them, that's perfectly okay. All right, plop them right down. And we started out with about probably 2 tablespoons of shortening in each skillet. Now these are going to puff up some because this is self-rising flour. All right, so we're going to let these cook for just a little while, and we're going to be turning them over. So hold on. All right, I have turned my burner down to medium-low now. I'm going to add some butter to each skillet. And then we're going to turn them over, even though we'll probably turn them over yet another time. But this is the tricky part, because they're not completely browned there. And then this one, let that butter get under it. Flip it over. The butter's going to cook all into it. Then we'll make a little hole right in the middle. Let some of the steam out. Alright, so I'm going to turn the back ones, and we'll be back when these are done. Alright, now that I have flipped them over, I put a little hole in the top of each one to let some of the steam out. And of course, I wasn't quite quick enough on this one. It kind of split on one end, but that's okay, because grandmas did that sometimes too. So we'll put a dab of butter on the other side of them and kind of spread that out. And again, I'm cooking them on medium-low now. Spread that butter out. See how I've got the little hole? Can y'all see that? It's right there, a little itty-bitty hole in the top of each one of them. All right, we're going to let these cook a little longer. I'm going to flip them over yet again, get them a little more brown on the other side, and we'll be back and show you what they look like. All right, I have flipped these over again, and they're just about done. One of them did break, just like my grandmother's did. Y'all see that? One end of it broke off. But anyway, they're doing a little sizzling now because some of that apple juice is from the apples is coming out a little bit on the bottom. But anyway, that's what they're supposed to do. All right, when I take these up, we'll be back. All right, I took the apple fritters up. There's what it looks like. See how it kind of cracked a little bit in there, and some of that apple juice kind of seeped out a little bit. There's the other one. And then here's the one that broke. I cut that in two so you could see the inside of it. Here's all the apple, and the outside is real buttery and crispy. They are delicious. Real country apple fritters is what I would call them. And these are some really big ones, but when grandmother made them, and she was making them with leftover biscuit dough, of course they weren't this big, but you can see why this would pretty much be a meal. So this is going to be our supper tonight. All right, we will see y'all next time.